don't know, I can get into anime movies because they're a singular experience, but I've never really been able to get into anime series because of what a time commitment they can be. Maybe I just don't get anime. I mean, this is fun, but is this how it all is? I can't tell if I'm supposed to be taking this seriously or if it's meant to be done like a parody. If it's meant to be like a parody, then maybe this just wasn't the right anime for me to start on. But if it's not, I don't know how much of this I can take. Alright, so I guess not all anime is trash. For those of you unaware, Star Wars Visions is a direct-to-Disney Plus anthology series released in late 2021. Each episode is heralded by a different prolific Japanese animation studio, each studio bringing their own unique animation style to the Star Wars universe. This is such a neat series. It's not perfect, and there are some rocky spots, but the good parts of this are damn good. Star Wars Visions taps into something that I feel like Star Wars has largely lacked since it was acquired by Disney, and that's its sense of wonder. As much as I love Rogue One and have mostly enjoyed The Mandalorian, they're not the most original things out there. Much of modern Star Wars media feels so reliant on our nostalgia for the property. It's media that doesn't reach for the stars, usually it just barely surpasses the bar. Star Wars Visions is the only release from the franchise in years that has truly invigorated me. I want to see more of these side stories happening around the universe, and this is such a cool way of making these stories come to life. It may not be the most accessible thing in the world since anime definitely isn't everyone's thing, at least in America, but goddamn. Exploring the rest of this galaxy far, far away through stories unconnected to the Skywalkers is the way to keep this franchise alive. And Star Wars Visions is the best example Disney's yet put out that exemplifies this concept. Even as someone not all too big into anime, I was really excited to check this series out, and I am so glad that I did. This is such a cool idea for a series, and I really hope it continues on, either continuing as an anthology of stories, or expanding the stories shown in this first batch of episodes. It's hard to say much about Star Wars Visions holistically because of its anthology structure. So, going from what I considered to be the worst to the best episodes, I want to discuss each episode and its themes in depth and see how they impact the series as a complete package. And if you're new around here, here's how I rate stuff when critiquing media. You can tell my immediate thoughts on something based on the color of the text I use within its segment. Is that clear enough? Cool. And if you are new here, hi. Thanks for stopping by. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, do all that. I really appreciate it. There'll be more long-form retrospectives like these coming soon. There'll also be more short-form essays and reviews like this one, and maybe a secret project or two coming a little farther down the pipeline. So please stick around. Stay tuned. This is only the beginning of a lot of great stuff. So, with all that said, number 9, TOB1. This one's going for something very different from the rest of the series, I know, and I tried to like it, I really did, but I just don't. I appreciate the uniqueness of the animation. The crayon-like way everything is drawn is pretty neat, but this episode's story is just too derivative for my liking. For anyone who doesn't know, this is Astro Boy. He's basically the Japanese Mickey Mouse. This episode is just Astro Boy. From the character design to the story structure, even down to the character names, this is just Astro Boy. I realize that Astro Boy isn't too popular in the West, and this episode could be trying to pay homage and bring more attention to the character for English-speaking audiences. But as someone who grew up with Astro Boy, a longtime fan who had one of their first genuine exposures to Japanese culture from this character, TOB1 just doesn't do enough differently for me to find it all too memorable. It's cute, I guess, but it's just not for me. I still think it's worth a watch though. It may be more for you than for me, who knows. Number 8, Akakiri. This is another episode with a pretty unique animation quality. I really like it here too, it feels sorta Cowboy Bebop-y. My issue with this episode, once again, comes down to the story. This is more or less just Anakin's story from Revenge of the Sith, but somehow with less understandable motivations. The main character's relationship with the princess is interesting, but why does he so easily give things up in the end? The beginning sets him up as a tenacious warrior. This sudden shift at the end doesn't make any sense. It kinda defeats the purpose of the rest of the episode. On top of that, this shouldn't have been the final episode of the collection. Had this been placed in some different order within the season, I may have a slightly different opinion on it. But as it is, this sort of sends the series out on a whimper. It's not bad, but not all too great either. Number 7, Tatooine Rhapsody. This episode gets way too much hate. Like TOB1, this is doing something pretty different from the rest of the series. It approaches the Star Wars universe from a more chibi perspective, and as far as I'm concerned, I think it works. People tear this episode apart, and it's just cute fan service. Jesus, leave it alone. Hey everybody, quick announcement from Editing Matthew. This will just take a second. First of all, hi to all of you new viewers. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you enjoy your stay. Second off, while I do have a few videos in the works right now, you may notice over the next few months that my upload schedule might slow down a little bit. But just to prove that I'm still working on stuff, in front of you are a few titles for things I'm currently working on. While yes, it is summer vacation for me, and I should have a ton more time to work on videos, I may or may not be a little preoccupied with a big earlier mentioned secret project that I may or may not have been conceptualizing and working on since this past October. This project may or may not require a ton of work from me and a bunch of other people over the next few months, and may or may not be the biggest thing I've ever worked on. So, stay tuned. Anyways, that's all I've got to say for right now. Announcement over. Back to silly Star Wars cartoon. Number 6, The Elder. This episode is a little sloppy in execution, but it's got some really neat ideas, and tells a unique story that also builds onto the lore of the greater Force canon. On top of that, I really like the chemistry between the two lead characters. The way they're written shows off that they have a background with each other, and it helps to better establish the world of the episode. It's a little rocky at times, but it's a good watch. Number 5, The Twins. This is goofy as shit, but the visuals are neat, the characters are enjoyable, and no matter how horrendously written some of the dialogue is, the English celebrity voice actors in this episode do a particularly great job. Number 4, The Ninth Jedi. Lakara is a great main character, and I'd love to see more adventures with her in the future. This is another episode with great animation and world building that adds cool new details to the Star Wars canon. I love the relationships established throughout the episode, and it sets up a cool sequence of events. Everything seems to be lining up to make this one of the best episodes of the season. How are there still 3 episodes ahead of this? Ethan. Ethan is sort of set up as a secondary protagonist, and he is the most milquetoast, boring, standard anime protagonist out there. He is useless, and his expository dialogue is stilted beyond belief. If they bring back this cast of characters, just kill him off. He is a waste of screen time. But overall, this episode shows a ton of promise, even if it has a couple shortcomings, keeping it from being as f***ing great as it could be. And speaking of f***ing great, oh my god, La Pinocho is so f***ing good, dude. This is easily the episode I'm most passionate about, and that's simply based on the fact that this is the only episode that feels truly stifled by its runtime. I obviously have 2 episodes ranked above this one because I think both of them better conform to the episodic format they're in. But this episode? It sets up an interesting world and an interesting conflict that should absolutely be expanded into its own series, or maybe even its own movie. As is, some of this episode feels a little rushed as a couple character dynamics aren't as fleshed out as they could be, but the basis of those dynamics and the plot they set up are really something special. The way this story is incorporated into the greater Star Wars universe is really cool too, and so is the planet it takes place on. It's able to mix in traditional Japanese artwork, culture, and architecture with classical Star Wars designs in a unique way that somehow feels totally natural. It has, without a doubt, my favorite art style of the bunch, if only because of its attention to detail. The shot composition in this episode is exceptional, and shows so much forethought on the part of the studio. Lop is debatably my favorite protagonist in Visions. Her optimism and complicated familial bonds are the perfect setup for an interesting Jedi Knight. And this story is handled with an amount of weight and grandiosity that's missing from nearly every other episode of the show. It is criminal that this story will more than likely be confined to only 1 episode of this grander series, because it has potential that far outreaches that. I can't recommend this episode enough, even if its runtime holds it back from being as sensational as it could be. Number 2, The Duel. With how much inspiration the original Star Wars trilogy took from Akira Kurosawa's classic samurai movies, this may have been an obvious route for at least 1 episode of Visions to travel, but my god is it well done. The pacing is great, the character design is great, the fan service is subtle and cool, the usage of color, or lack thereof, is super powerful, there's really nothing wrong with this episode. I will say I don't think it should be the first episode of the series, though. It sort of sets the wrong expectations going forward since it's such an insane departure from the rest of the series. In fact, this season as a whole is pretty poorly organized in my opinion. Even though it's an anthology series, it's still possible to arrange these in a way that allows for a satisfactory emotional and stylistic through line. But as these episodes are listed on Disney+, it really doesn't work. Not like I have a ton of experience in making unconnected things feel more connected, but if you happen to rewatch this series or end up watching it for the first time, try watching them in this order. At least in my opinion, this order makes the season a lot more enjoyable and much more satisfactory overall. But we still have one episode to talk about. Without a doubt my favorite episode, and the one I think you should watch first. And that episode is... Number 1. The Village Bride. This episode has everything going for it. It still gives Star Wars fans the goods when it comes to integrating futuristic technology and showing off lightsabers and expanding on elements of the Force. Hell, the main character even does the Episode 1 Force run at one point. But what makes this episode undoubtedly the best, at least in my opinion, is the emotional level it's able to tap into. This episode tells a human story that explores elements of spirituality and themes of destiny and free will. This is what Star Wars is all about, and this episode just gets that. And it explores those ideas with a beautiful subtlety lacking from every other episode of the series thus far. On top of that, it's a gorgeous episode to look at. It's not the most stylish one of the bunch, but its simplicity reflects the themes of the episode and is able to mix nature and technology in a completely realistic way. And it's one of the only episodes that feels like it's trying to say more than just what's happening on the surface level. And that's always a good thing for a story to have. This is the best episode of the series, and no one can convince me otherwise. I mean, even Disney agrees with me, so take that for what you will, I guess. Star Wars Visions may be a bit of a mixed bag of quality, but it is undeniably the most interesting and exciting thing Disney has done with the property since its acquisition. While I've gotten enjoyment out of some of their recent ventures, Star Wars Visions is the only piece of Star Wars media as of late that actively takes risks in its execution, and that's something the property desperately needs to do more of. I hope they continue this series, and I hope it gets more popular, because even if it's not them technically doing it, it's really nice to see the House of Mouse embracing traditional animation again on such a grandiose scale. Please watch Star Wars Visions for yourself and form your own opinions, and tell me what you thought about it. Leave a comment down below, I'd love to read them. And until next time.